Hey everyone, this is Orcrist, and today it's with great pleasure that I present my first in a multi-video series about the lost origin stories in The Legend of Zelda. As I said in the intro vid, the first part of this series will be focused on Majora's Mask. We'll be discussing several unexplained plot and lore elements of this game, and honestly I'm not sure where to begin. So I think we'll start with the first plot points in the introductory cutscene. When you select a new file, the game begins with a short text scroll connecting the end of Ocarina of Time to current events. The narration states that Link is on a journey in search of a beloved and invaluable friend, a friend with whom he parted ways when he finally fulfilled his heroic destiny. Canonically speaking, Link is in search of Navi, though I personally wouldn't call her a beloved friend. Okay, all jokes aside, I find this passage kind of confusing. When we last saw Navi, they appeared to have parted ways in the Temple of Time, and I'm not sure why Link would be looking for her in some unnamed forest, but I digress. Link is searching for a friend, he's brought Epona with him, and they're on a journey. From there, we're led to believe Link and Epona might be in a remote corner of Hyrule, perhaps in the Lost Woods, but it isn't exactly clear. It would make sense that Link has left the boundaries of Hyrule behind given what happens next. Suddenly, Epona is startled by the fairies Tattle and Tail, and Link is knocked unconscious. Seconds later, the Skull Kid appears out of thin air and proceeds to look through Link's belongings. I'd imagine Link could have any number of things taken from him, but the Skull Kid chose the Ocarina of Time, almost like he was looking for it specifically. When Link confronts him, the Skull Kid flees on Epona with his victim clinging to his leg. Now, let's stop there just for a second. Later on in the story, we learn that the Skull Kid stole Majora's Mask from the Happy Mask salesman and has caused a number of troublesome events in the land of Termina. It's not exactly clear when he stole the mask, nor is it obvious when he set into motion so many world-ending catastrophes. So first, we should straighten out the sequence of events. Though from context it seems like the Skull Kid has had Majora's Mask for a long time, I theorize that the Skull Kid stole Majora's Mask only minutes before he robbed Link. I say that despite knowing that the Skull Kid used Majora to pull the moon to the earth, imprison the four giants in their temples, set plagues upon the main areas of Termina, and change the lives of several minor characters forever. Yet it doesn't make sense that the Skull Kid stole Majora, fled to Termina to cause mischief, then came back to Hyrule simply to rob another random traveler. What's more, Tattle knows nothing of what's happening in Termina, but her brother Tail, whom she only lost contact with minutes before, knows everything. So when did the Skull Kid set into motion the World's End? We'll get to that later, I promise. Another proof of when Majora was stolen is seen in Tattle's recollection of the event. It's clear from the scenery in the cutscene that the robbery took place in the same woods that Link was traveling through. Considering his troublemaker personality, it makes a lot more sense that the Skull Kid maybe as a prank decided to scare some traveler and then another. Yet it's hard to reconcile how a simple prank turned into a full assault and robbery. Tattle seems to think that this was a random act of violence, though it's clear from the ominous noise coming from Majora that something much more sinister is at play here. We know from the end of the game that Majora has been using the Skull Kid since the beginning, that it has its own designs for Termina. It's fair to assume then that this robbery wasn't a random act, but orchestrated by Majora to liberate itself from the Happy Mask salesman. It's not explicitly stated, but the fact that the Skull Kid chose Majora among many others tells me that the mask was calling out to him. I think it's a fair assumption given Majora's power to consume an entire world and literally transform anything it wishes, yet calling out to and controlling weaker minds is perhaps one of its more disturbing powers. So what started as a simple prank turned into a transfer of power, and with his newfound powers the Skull Kid couldn't help but test his abilities on the first person he met. This leads me to another question: why Link? Was Link just in the wrong place at the wrong time and having his precious ocarina taken from him just bad luck? Or was his involvement in the events of Termina intended? If we can surmise that Majora is cunning enough to free itself, it follows that the mask also has ways of protecting its interests. In many ways, Majora reminds me of the One Ring from The Lord of the Rings. Sauron's ring can call out to people, twist their minds and corrupt them, and even betray or protect itself from outside threats. So I believe that, as a way of protecting itself, Majora whispered into the Skull Kid's ear to target the boy. Majora would be able to recognize what sort of power Link possessed as the hero of destiny. It knew that if this boy wandered too close to Termina, he might spoil the mask's plans. For these reasons, Majora guided the Skull Kid to its nearest threat, Link, and commanded him to strip him of his power, namely the Ocarina of Time. Okay, so that's the first 2 minutes of the game, and a lot has happened already. Now let's shift our focus back to Link's pursuit of the Skull Kid. After losing contact, Link continues the chase into a mysterious cave and plunges unexpectedly into a bottomless pit. The images of masks swirl past the screen as Link lands suddenly on a giant flower. Waiting for Link at the bottom is his adversary, who is now floating effortlessly in the air. The Skull Kid has apparently gotten rid of Epona and is ready to show you his true power. Link is transformed into a Deku Scrub and left behind with Tattle. A brief alliance is formed in pursuit of the Skull Kid, and Link passes through a few more caves on his way into Termina. Now, it's very easy to just gloss over this short tutorial section of the game without a second thought. Yes, you learn a new application of Deku Nuts and about flower gliding and Z-targeting, but where are we exactly? Are we still in Hyrule? Did we enter Termina the moment we fell into the cave? If you regard things as presented, the cave is simply an underground passageway to a different country and there isn't much more to say. But I think there's a lot more going on here. For example, if you take a closer look at the first room, there is a symbol of a fragmented Triforce being projected onto the ground. The Triforce of Wisdom and Courage are joined together, while the Triforce of Power sits below. This room is a clear reference to the Chamber of Sages from Ocarina of Time, but unlike that sacred realm, Link makes his arrival outside the circle, which symbolically speaking is a clear allusion to the current state of the Triforce, and also an indication that Link has officially departed Hyrule. But why is a room mirroring the sacred realm located in a bizarre cave? We know from other Zelda games such as Skyward Sword that this world has many illusory realms. I believe that this cave is yet another hidden realm of Hyrule and serves to connect different worlds. So not only is this cave a realm separate from those we know best, it has properties that make it more akin to a wormhole than a passageway. The evidence of this wormhole theory begin with Link's plummet into the cave. We hear wind rushing by as though we're flying a great distance at tremendous speed, and not just falling downward. Strange images blur and speed up as you pass them, and things only come back into focus when you make landfall. Link also has an odd encounter just before he leaves this mysterious realm. I'm referring of course to the frozen tree that Tattle describes as looking all dark and gloomy, almost like it could start crying at any second now. In the epilogue of the game we learn who this tree was, and I have theories of how it came to this gap in time and space, but let's not get too far off topic. The last thing I want to focus on is when Link walks through the crooked passageway. Again, the image blurs and swirls before your eyes, much like when Link fell into the cave. Instead of hearing wind this time, we hear a supernatural sound rising to a higher pitch as Link traverses from one side of the passage to the other. This sound is identical to the one heard when Link travels 7 years into the future. It's as though the laws of physics and gravity are changing wildly around Link. Listen closely. As a story element, I believe the player is expected to let this moment pass by and simply appreciate the aesthetic. But just for fun, let's dive a little deeper into what the bottomless pit and crooked passageway really are, and what happened when the doors of the clock tower closed behind him. And that, sadly, brings us to the end of this video, mostly because we've only talked about the first 7 minutes of the game and there's already so much going on. But as a small teaser for the next video, we'll be talking about how the Skull Kid managed to cause so much trouble in so little time, and we might even discuss some amateur physics. For now, I want to say thank you and remind you to subscribe to my YouTube and follow my Twitch channel at orcrist_GC, where I do Breath of the Wild speedruns and other fun stuff. I hope this first video has piqued your interest, because it only gets more complicated from here. So, see you on the other side, everyone.